The Loss of Innocence by Taylor Williams, Harmon Dillon, Alyssa Bloomfield, and Anusha Dervesh.
We will begin the presentation by defining loss of innocence. Then, we will transition into how our theme is evident in the following novels: Perks of Being a Wallflower, Go Ask Alice, The Book Thief, and The Coldest Winter Ever. During the course of this presentation, we will also cover examples of loss of innocence that can be found in Purple Hibiscus and Sunny's Blues. To conclude, we will be discussing loss of innocence in our society today. Loss of innocence in literature is defined as a character arc where a character presented at the start is naive or extremely idealistic, and through the action of the story gains knowledge, understanding, and experience that alters behavior at the end.
The novel I read was Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. Perks of Being a Wallflower focuses on a young, awkward, withdrawn boy named Charlie, who is the definition of a wallflower. He sees all, hears all, but never participates in the action. He constantly worries about others, what they think of him, what's going on beneath the surface, and obsessing over his unresolved issues. In order to cope with the anxiety of starting high school, the death of his aunt, and his friend's recent suicide, Charlie writes letters to an anonymous stranger he calls friend. Through his letters, we experience the ups and downs of his social, romantic, and family life throughout his freshman year. Charlie meets a group of misfit friends who introduce him to a world of drugs, sex, alcohol, and partying. However, this sense of community helps Charlie feel more comfortable. As he finally feels like he has true friends, he begins to come out of his shell. Through Charlie, we see the loss of innocence that occurs in high school, and like the theme presented in our song, The A-Team, that no one is exempt from it. An important quote I found on page 96 is Patrick, and he's talking about Charlie, and he says, "You're a wallflower. You see things. You keep quiet about them, and you understand." So like I said, Patrick says this about Charlie, and he's talking about the perks of being a wallflower and the negatives. The negatives are it's difficult for Charlie to interact with people and put himself out there. And we can see this in his romantic life when he dated one of his friends, Alice, and he wasn't able to express that he really wasn't into her like that. But on the other hand, he's completely madly in love with his best friend, Sam, but doesn't know how to tell her, and he goes the most of the novel without expressing his feelings that he's in love with Sam. However, because he's a wallflower, he knows the secrets of almost all his friends and family because they confide in him, and they know that he's not going to tell anyone, mainly because he really has no one else to tell. We also see that he sees that his sister has an abusive boyfriend, got pregnant, and then had an abortion, and his sister only told Charlie because she trusted him and knew that he wouldn't rat her out. Also, we see that his best friend Patrick is gay and is hooking up with the most popular guy in school. A major theme that's presented in Perks of Being a Wallflower is the impact of drugs and alcohol. And this is connected to our motif because drugs and alcohol is an element that alters many teens' innocence this day and age. In the beginning of the novel, Charlie would decline offers of pot, cigarettes, and alcohol because he's a good kid and that's really not what he's interested in. However, as he becomes less of a wallflower and goes outside his comfort, he becomes addicted to smoking cigarettes and doing drugs, and he even does some harsh drugs like LSD. And this also alters how his brain works the rest of the novel. And as a result, he has a mental breakdown and ends up in the hospital at the end of the novel. Because he's exposed to this new world of doing drugs and drinking all the time, this is his new coping mechanism. He's no longer the loser who just goes to school, does homework, and reads every day. And that was, like I said, his coping mechanism. And he was just used to being to himself, and now he has other options. And this can be shown in that after he had a fight with his friends, he turns to Bob, who's the school drug dealer, and says, "After a week of not talking to anyone, I finally called Bob. I know that's wrong, but I didn't know what else to do. I asked him if there was anything I would buy. He said he had a 1/4 of an ounce of pot left, so I used some Easter money and bought it. I've been smoking it all the time since then." And a thing to notice is that he uses his Easter money to buy the pot, And normally kids would use their Easter money to like buy something more innocent as opposed to drugs.
The book thief takes place in a town called Molking, which is right on the outskirts of Munich, Germany. A young girl named Liesel Memminger is taken in by foster parents right before World War II. She grows up in Nazi Germany and finds herself being appalled with the Führer, aka Adolf Hitler. Her family feels the same way as her, yet keep it under wraps so they won't be in trouble with the Nazi Party. Her foster father, Hans Huberman, tries his best to accommodate Liesel as she struggles with nightmares for an extended period of time because of the war and the Führer. What is interesting about this novel is the narrator, who is Death. Liesel cheats Death many times more than others, which is why Death is so intrigued by her story. It even says itself how out of all the lives it has taken from the world throughout many civilizations and eras, this story will always be unique and invigorating. The loss of innocence is a very prevalent theme in The Book Thief. Liesel Memminger went through a lot in her lifetime just from the early years. She buried her brother right in front of her eyes. Her mother left her. She was forced to go into a foster home, into the foster care system in Germany at a very young age. So she really had seen a lot, and her nightmares never stopped, and that was an essence of the loss of innocence as well, because through her imagination and her subconscious, she saw the worst things possible happening to her repeatedly, and that really made her grow as a person. Also, the political agenda of that time was really a big part of her emotional growth and awareness, because even from a young age, she realized that what Hitler was preaching at that time was incorrect. Stealing became a very important part of Liesel's life. She stole books from the most avant-garde places. Learning new words and reading became her own way of rebelling in such a vicious society. When her brother was buried, the gravediggers left a book in the snow titled The Gravedigger's Handbook. She had stolen the book and kept it with her until she arrived to her new home. Quote, "The book thief had struck for the first time, the beginning of an illustrious career," says Death, as this is the first encounter that began her craze for words and definitions. This has to do with the loss of innocence because Liesel put her whole world in danger in order to read. Books that didn't have to do with Nazi propaganda were heavily looked down upon, but her increase in knowledge made her see the world around her in a very mature manner. She understood concepts like death and war from a very young age, so in a way she had lost her innocence long before acting upon the desire to. An important theme was that it's okay to be different from a crowd if you genuinely believe that what the people are blindly representing is inhumane and cruel. Hans Huberman became her backbone for this newfound understanding between the difference of right versus wrong.
The Coldest Winter Ever by Sister Souljah. The setting of this novel is in the projects in Brooklyn, New York. The setting not only shapes our main character, but also gives the readers insight into where our characters grew up. The projects is definitely not a rich or even a safe area, but Winter Santiago, our 16-year-old main character, her father is the drug lord and is in charge. But her perfect life doesn't last long. Her father gets enough money to move to Long Island, and this is where Winter's life changes completely. Her father soon gets arrested, and her mother goes off the deep end. Winter is left to fend for herself, but goes down the wrong path. She puts her faith and trust in men that she shouldn't, and makes enemies with the wrong people, leaving her beat up and left in a car that contains drugs, and she is ultimately charged with a crime she didn't commit, and sentenced to jail for 15 years. The loss of innocence in The Coldest Winter Ever. The theme of the novel is never to take anything for granted and not to grow up too fast. As represented in the quote on page 5, "By the time I was 7, I understood the rules perfectly. Keep the family's business quiet." This theme relates to our motif of loss of innocence due to Winter had jumped into things. Winter's lifestyle was definitely really advanced in comparison to the other kids her age, due to the way she was brought up and also what she had to do to survive on her own. Winter's behavior had really emphasized on her rapid loss of innocence. Her father was a drug lord, and due to him being caught and arrested and her mother becoming obsolete in her life, she had to grow up and be on her own at a young age. Winter had lost her innocence when she had decided to throw herself at men in order for her to survive and have the life she wanted, but with this she lost her friends, respect, and herself as well.
For a connection to a novel that we've read this year, we chose Purple Hibiscus. And just to review, Purple Hibiscus takes place in a small village in Nigeria. According to everyone else in the village, the Achiki family is perfect. Beatrice and Eugene have the perfect marriage with the perfect children who are at the top of their class and are regular churchgoers. However, behind closed doors lives a broken, abusive family. Jaja, Kim, and Beatrice don't know a life outside their village, and most importantly, they don't know what freedom and individuality is. Through spending time with Auntie Fiona and their cousins, they experience a new life and realize they want a life like that. As a result, Beatrice realizes the pain and hurt her husband caused her family and poisons him. Jaja takes the blame for her mother because he knows his sister wouldn't make it without their mother, and he knows he is the man of the house and sacrifices his freedom for what's left of his family. From the beginning of the novel, we notice Jaja and Kimberly don't have a normal childhood. They both live under the strict Catholic rule of their father, who expects his children to be perfect at all times. If they fall slightly below the bar, they get beaten. As a result, Jaja and Kimberly have no idea what fun is. Their focus isn't youthful, fun things and living their lives. Their focus is being at the top of their class so their father doesn't beat them, covering bruises, and coming up with lies as to why they were in the hospital for days. The book opens with Jaja rebelling against his father by skipping communion on Palm Sunday, an important religious holiday. This shows Jaja is no longer the young, naive boy who simply follows the rules and goes through the motions, but rather a young man whose role is to protect his family from his dictator father. Both Kimberly and Jaja take steps towards adulthood by overcoming adversity and being exposed to new thoughts. The turning point of the novel, and where the children start to realize their loss of innocence, is when they visit Auntie Fiona. It is here they experience a different life of freedom, happiness, and the true meaning of family unity. Jaja and Kimberly realize their loss of innocence occurred at a young age because they were so focused on making their father proud, they missed out on a huge part of being a kid. In a sense, Papa stole their innocence. Following visiting Auntie Fiona, the entire family gets punished in different ways. Papa punishes his kids for spending time with his father, who doesn't have the same religious beliefs as him, and soaks his children's feet in boiling hot water. He also beats his wife so bad she suffers a miscarriage. They are being punished for spending time with their family, which is typically a huge part of a child's life, especially the bond between a child and their cousin. A significant quote is said by Kimberly on page 269 when she says, "That night when I bathed with a bucket half full of rainwater, I did not scrub my left hand, the hand that Father Amati had held gently to slide the flour off my finger. I did not heat the water either, because I was afraid that the heating coil would make the rainwater lose the scent of the sky. I sang as I bathed. There were more earthworms in the bathtub, and I left them alone, watching the water carry them and send them down the drain." This quote is significant because it shows her crush on Father Amati, the sense of innocence that Kimberly still has. Typically, a crush is associated with youthfulness. We see how excited she got over something so simple as Father Amati's touch and doesn't want the feeling of his touch to go away, which is why she doesn't want to wash her left hand. We also see a genuinely happy side of Kimberly as she sings while she bathes, something she normally doesn't do at home. Also, she is normally disgusted by the sight of the earthworms while she bathes, but at this instant she's so giddy their presence doesn't seem to bother her.
Sunny's Blues also presents the theme of loss of innocence. It begins with the unnamed narrator receiving news of his brother Sunny's arrest. He is shocked to find that his brother is a heroin addict. The narrator doesn't speak to his brother until the narrator's daughter tragically passes away at a young age. The reader also learns that the narrator's mother left him with the responsibility of looking after Sunny. Sunny brings up the universal nature of suffering and expresses how drugs and music have helped him cope with his suffering. As the narrator watches his brother play the piano, he is finally able to understand his brother's suffering. The narrator is reminded of his own suffering as well. By understanding Sunny, he has come to understand himself. In Sunny's Blues, Baldwin uses the term darkness to represent a bad time or period of suffering in the lives of the characters. In the beginning of the short story, the author is discussing the main character, Sunny, and other characters who struggle with drug addictions. He describes these characters in a very dark, depressing manner. He says, "They were filled with rage. All they really knew were two darknesses, the darkness of their lives, which was now closing in on them, and the darkness of the movies, which had blinded them to that other darkness." Page 123. The characters are struggling with their addictions, and they don't have any good or light in their lives. The meaning of light in the story is referring to the recovery stage of Sonny's drug addiction, but also how he lost innocence throughout his journey. A loss of innocence in Sonny's character is revealed when the two brothers shake hands. The quote reads, "When they shook hands, the baby brother he'd never known looked out from the depths of his private life, like an animal waiting to be coaxed into the light." Page 127. Here, the narrator is describing how his brother, Sonny, was once his baby brother, but now is similar to an animal that needs to be tamed. The word light in this case is used to represent what would be when Sonny overcomes his drug addiction, and how he needs his brother to help him reach recovery.
Youth today may not have to deal with concepts as frightening as totalitarian leaders in oppressed societies. Instead, the pressure to fit in and be cool has taken over children in the United States. Internet trends and other media have a hold on all of us. Children who are shown mature content feel exploited and vulnerable, believing that they need to grow up much sooner than they really do in order to be like others around them. Parents nowadays fear that their children are far too sophisticated and curious to attain maturity. This incline of societal pressure has been different for every generation. Yet, when you give a child a smartphone, you're giving them the key to everything you want them to be sheltered by till a certain age. This video goes in depth about the concept of children who want to lose their innocence. To conclude this presentation, here is a video demonstrating the loss of innocence in modern society. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Okay, and why would you do that, I wonder?
It's a typical scene in many family homes. A child playing on the internet.
I didn't even know you had an Instagram account.
Dad said I could.
But for one mother, her child playing on the internet led to a very adult discussion.
He put in a general term which brought up some pretty difficult websites you really wouldn't want a 9-year-old to see.
This led to Dawn having that very adult conversation she never thought she would have with such a young son.
Obviously my first inclination was to be really cross and horrified. You know, you want your little boy to be still innocent and clutching his teddy and reading Enid Blyton.
So she talked to him about it.
I had to have a little chat and decided to play it quite cool.
But Dawn is not alone. According to the latest survey from AVG Technologies, almost 7 out of 10 parents will have had a birds and the bees conversation with their children by the time they're just 11. And around 80% believe this is because of the internet.
You just don't know when it's going to come up. I don't think you can plan for it. You're never expecting it. It just happens.
So, has the internet had a negative impact on childhood innocence?
We have an idea now that children are growing up too fast, but we've created that impression to some extent. And you'd be surprised how much children are aware of certain things.
And many people are not surprised by the results of the survey.
I got into it myself because I wanted to know what they were doing and what they would get access to.
I think it is a problem where parents don't have enough control over where children wander on the internet. I think children, whatever they read on the internet, I think they take as the truth.
I do think it's really important to answer kids' questions when they come up. So I don't really think that you can peg a certain age, like say 11 is the catch-all age for everybody because every situation is different.
That said, yes, the internet is contributing as well, because increasingly I think parents are having to say we have to anticipate what children can find. More and more so because the children will have more on their own devices. You can't physically monitor them quite the same way as you used to.
How about National Geographic?
How do you spell national?
You really are making it up as you go along. The overriding thing that I had with my child was that when I did talk to him about it and I did speak about how he shouldn't be doing it, he was really pleased to know that there were boundaries and that he wasn't kind of lost in the woods as such and lost in the wilderness of this scary new world. It's a great world, but there's a lot of, you don't want to stray off the path really.